ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Ultimate Doctor Who Marathon, where we take a look at every single classic Doctor Who story, one episode per day at a time. And today is the 6th of August, 2017, as I start the 4-part serial, The Massacre of St. Bartholomew's Eve, with the first episode, War of God. Now, this story was written by John Lucarotti, who wrote 2 previous stories, and the quality so far of the first episode indicates that this is going to be at least up to snuff with Marco Polo and the Aztecs. I hope if the episode doesn't go downhill. There are a couple of flaws, mainly that, well, there are a lot of characters and they don't get sufficient introduction. A lot of it is set up that the Doctor and Stephen land in France, and they're at the time of the Medici family being in charge, and Henry of Navarre, and there's just a lot of historical jargon thrown at you that if you really don't know the period, you're going to get lost. I'm already starting to lose it just a little bit. It's a very, very enjoyable episode, don't get me wrong. Peter Purves in particular makes the episode enjoyable, as William Hartnell isn't in it very much. And the twist at the end for the cliffhanger about who this Abbot of Amboise is, is enough to make me consider continuing to watch the episode, because we've got something good to go on this beginning. I'm just hoping that it'll actually keep on this track and we don't actually go off into the territory of just a story that is totally and completely boring. You have the Doctor going off to meet this Charles Breslin, who is he runs an apothecary, and then he's basically out of the plot. You have the Huguenots being plotted against, a bartender being told, yeah, tell me what they're doing, and I'll tell the Queen Mother. And it's a bunch of factions, and they're all sort of started, and with 4 episodes, I don't know if that's going to be enough to plot everything together. It's very, very hard to keep your head around, but it's still very enjoyable. Peter Purves is great. There's a woman named Anne Chaplet, basically, a young girl who basically says, yeah, this whole thing that happened in this one French city where everything fall apart, where all the Protestants were killed by the Catholics. Yeah, I've overheard that might be happening again, guys. And it's like, oh my gosh. And Stephen's going off for the night because the Doctor and Stephen promised to meet up in the evening, and the Doctor's nowhere to be found. So really, that's really all we've got for the story to start. It's not very much. There isn't. It's a really, really good episode. It's just, it's a good starting point. I just don't know if it'll be able to continue with this thrust. So, War of God, the first episode, gets an 8 out of 10, which of course leads tomorrow for the second episode of the story, which is The Sea Beggar. It's still the 6th of August, 2017, as I decided to double up on episodes today. I might even triple up. Who knows how that goes, but I just finished watching The Sea Beggar, the second episode of The Massacre of St. Bartholomew's Eve. It's not as good as War of God. The episodes seem to be declining. This was a very, very difficult episode to watch, just because this is a story with no visual material from it. That's something you have to understand, is that no visual material exists because the Daleks Master Plan episode 12 doesn't exist, and the Ark, while it exists, neither of the stories in between it actually have any footage, and all 4 episodes are missing, and this is just one that no footage, no censor clips have happened. And of course it wasn't telesnap, so Loose Cannon are doing their best with the reconstruction, I think, and I can definitely follow what's going on. Stephen is trying to figures out that the Abbot looks like the Doctor, and it's like, wait, is he the Doctor, is he not? And he overhears that this guy called the Sea Beggar is going to be killed, and he loses the trust of the Huguenots because, he's convinced that the Abbot is just the Doctor in a disguise or something for a bit. So, you have a character who doesn't really know what he wants to do with his... Sorry about that little break, but yeah, you have the Huguenots not really trusting Stephen because they think he's working for the Catholics who want them dead, and you have the intrigue get even worse when Stephen figures out that this guy called, quote-unquote, the Sea Beggar is going to be the public enemy number 1 for the Catholics, and in the morning he's killed And you have the Huguenot in charge, the Admiral de Coligny, working with the Catholics to try and garner some peace, that everything might actually just work out fine and nothing bad will actually happen. But because this is a very, very this time in history is a very, very difficult time to see through. There's no way of that actually working very well, and you just have all these factions competing for powers. It's like, well, is it maybe, and it's really, really hard to keep track of. The big problem, a lot of this episode is a lot of talking, a lot of stuff done through silence because there's no visual material. Patty Russell is a very visual director, it seems, as she prefers to have things done, marked out in a visual manner, whereas this one you can't really do it with the things. Even the cliffhanger, it's like, you figure out who the sea beggar is. He's the Admiral de Coligny, and you really don't have a sense of who these characters are. It's still a pretty enjoyable episode because I'm still following the plot pretty much. It has a pretty good plot. And you have some pretty good characters. Peter Purves and Annette Robertson, who's playing Anne Chaplet, are really the only two characters that you have good motivation for, and you really know who they are. So, and you really know that you really want to see them survive. So, I'm going to give the Sea Beggar a 6 out of 10, leading to the next episode, which is Priest of Death. Right, it's the 7th of August, 2017, and I just finished watching Priest of Death, the third episode of the Massacre of St. Bartholomew's Eve, and I have to say this episode, well, the plot it's there. There's most definitely a better strand of a plot. It just doesn't know what to do with its pacing, so much so that I found myself nearly dozing off several times while trying to watch it. The episode doesn't do much for you. It opens pretty nicely. You have Stephen still thinking that this Abbott guy is really the doctor in disguise, and is only really disbelieved when the Abbott gets killed near the end, and they're blaming it on the Huguenots. Basically, this is everybody gets shot, and we're blaming it on the Huguenots so we can get to the titular massacre in episode 4. Really, that's all there is to say about the episode. I'll try to do more. You have Peter Purves really still being the only strand of plot in the episode that, is sort of holding the interest of the audience, at least in my opinion. Peter Purves is obviously doing his best to give us some good character development in terms of Stephen, which, it's okay. There just really isn't too much to say about Priest of Death, except that, the Abbott in it is kind of awful, and we're sort of heading towards a conclusion. Everything's falling apart. It's really kind of dull, so I'm going to give Priest of Death a 4 out of 10. It is still the 7th of August 2017, and I just finished watching Bell of Doom, the final episode of the Massacre of St. Bartholomew's Eve. This episode is about the same quality as Priest of Death. What's really nice is that the story sort of wraps up around 10 minutes in as the massacre actually gets underway, and you see stuff get killed, and you have some really, really good moments, too. The later half of the episode itself is actually pretty decent, and there's one moment where Stephen, near the very, very beginning, where Stephen thinks that the doctor is dead because he still was convinced the Abbott was the doctor, and then sort of just the way the inflection in Peter Purves' voice changes immediately as soon as he notices the doctor come back in, and the doctor comes back into, the story, and back into Preslin's shop, and you actually have him returning into the story and being back as the character that we know. You already get, it's this great little switch, and it has this great acting, and then there's, of course, the doctor admitting, we can't take Anne with us. She has to try to leave the city or die because we can't change history. And that leads to Stephen freaking out and demanding that the Doctor take wherever they land next. Stephen doesn't care. He's leaving, and Stephen storms off, and it's great. It's only undermined slightly that Stephen comes back in, once Dodo Chaplet, the new companion who is introduced in the last 15 minutes, in the last 5 minutes of the episode. This is really the only story where, one of the few stories where there's really just a male companion with the Doctor, and it actually the dynamic works really well. That's really what makes the quality of the story very good whenever the Doctor and Stephen are together. But yeah, that really isn't too much. But what's great is that Stephen storms off, and the Doctor gives this great speech about how they've all left him, or all of his companions so far have left him, or they've all died. And it's a very, very powerful speech. He starts to think, maybe it's time for me to go back to my own planet. Maybe I've traveled enough. Maybe I should hang up my hat and stop traveling, which is just a great conceit to have William Hartnell, who's been the adventurer. He's going through time and space and adventuring the entire way through, and it's great, and he loves everything. Decide, it's time for me to hang up my stuff. It's really, really good. Only undermined, of course, by that they storm back in, and they go off, and we move to the next story. That's it. Other than that, there's not too much to talk about. The Massacre was probably look good, but Bell of Doom, because there's so much padding in between these sections, and there's so much that could have played out a lot better. This actually is very, very sad, because this is, I feel like, outside of the Daleks' master plan, this is really John Wiles' third story, and it's not boding well for the future that we are taking this turn in episode quality. But Bell of Doom gets a 4 out of 10. That being said, we add all scores for all 4 episodes, and then, of course, make the average to have the Massacre of St. Bartholomew's Eve receive a 5.5 out of 10. Thank you, everybody, for watching the Ultimate Doctor Who Marathon. Please leave a like, comment if you agree or disagree. I know quite a few of you will probably disagree. And then we'll see you next time when the Ultimate Doctor Who Marathon continues with the next televised story, The Ark.